In the early spring of 2011, I was hiking in a nature center late at night, as I sometimes do. I reported witnessing a conical egg-like craft landing there near the nature center pond several years ago. On this occasion, as I was returning home on the last leg of my walk through the woods, at approximately 3 a.m., I was walking past a house on the outskirts of the woods. All of a sudden, a deer runs frantically across the street in front of me, maybe 20 feet ahead, and skids and falls in front of me as it'd been spooked badly by something. I do not think that it was me that spooked the deer, because if it had noticed me, it would not have literally run across my path. I continued walking towards my home and took a path along the border of a farm that belongs to the last house next to the woods. The path is next to the woods, bordered by some open terrain and fields on the other side. While I was walking, my eyes were at a soft focus, not paying attention to anything in particular. Then, all of a sudden, my body instinctively stopped, and my eyes focused on the entity, approximately 25 yards ahead, slightly crouched, in a very aggressive posture, staring right at me. When I first saw the entity, I already knew that it was an extraterrestrial alien of some kind, without letting that thought occupy my mind as I was involved in a stare-down. Granted, there are so many other possibilities and explanations, logically speaking of course, but I will elaborate on the strangeness of the encounter with this entity. The entity glowed a dull gray blue, and if I remember correctly, the moon was shining, so there was some visibility as far as light is concerned. The strange thing was that the entity uniformly glowed the dull gray blue everywhere, as if it was naked and had no clothes on. No clothing was noticed on the creature. I am not new to the UFO and alien reports due to earlier sightings I have experienced and subsequent research, but the oversized head, skinny legs and arms, large eyes were not present on this creature. In fact, the entity seemed much more human-like in form, athletic, intense, focused, at the ready, aggressive in posture. I did not notice any eyes on the creature in the gray-blue haze, yet I could tell that it was staring directly at me, in a sort of a standoffish way, like two animals in the wild that are infringing on each other's terrain. After locking eyes for 3 seconds, this entity seemed surprised to see me, as if it was waiting for me and that I had noticed it too soon and been alerted. The creature then ran at full speed into the woods at a 90-degree angle. I heard the bushes rustle as the creature took off into the woods, and also another sound to my immediate left that sounded like a deer going through the woods by the size of the sound, as if it were chasing after the entity. I told a friend about the incident, and she said it was just some random person walking in the woods at night, and it was nothing. This, of course, is very possible, but there was a strange energy to the encounter. Nonetheless, after this incident, I have decided to take a different path home from now on. I hunt toads for my snakes down at this river. They call it the old boat ramp. I have grown up hearing people tell me weird things or how they saw something in the woods, but it just ended up being a stump or something. I never believed in those tales until last night. I was walking around under the bridge and was not having much luck finding any toads. As I reached the corner there, about 25 feet away, I saw something crouching in the water. Its back was towards me and its arms were moving, and I assumed it was eating a fish or something. This was not a split-second ordeal. I had a pretty good flashlight, a 20-volt LED DeWalt, and I had the flashlight directly on whatever this thing was. While examining it, I'm thinking to myself, this is a bear. It is hunched over and it had shoulders like a man, a back like a man, and a head like a man, but it had short gray hair that wasn't thick. You could see the pink skin underneath. After about 15 seconds of staring at this thing, it stopped whatever it was eating and turned its head to look at me. When I was examining the back, I really wasn't freaked out or scared, but as soon as it turned its head and we made eye contact, that's when the feeling shot through me. The face on this thing, well, I can't even explain it. It resembled the faces I've seen on werewolves. Small, squinty eyes, a protruding snout. I could tell it was angry. This is why I know that it was not an animal or a bear or anything like that, because as soon as it noticed my flashlight, it stopped and looked ahead of itself to see where the light was coming from. This tells me that this creature had a thinking process more sophisticated than an animal's. However, once this thing looked at me and we made eye contact, I turned around and I booked it back to my Jeep. I hopped in the Jeep and locked the doors, and then I backed the Jeep up and turned on the brights to see if this thing was coming after me. Thankfully, I didn't see anything. I went back the next morning to see if there were any tracks. I'm not easily convinced of the supernatural or what people see without any proof. I actually saw some tracks, and they were quite large. I could tell that this thing had very large claws by the prints. I don't exactly expect you to believe what I saw or what I'm saying now. All that I am saying is be careful out in the woods when you're by yourself. I live in California, where there are many hills and mountains, pines and redwoods, tree mixes with other forest trees, but not many bushes. I know the wildlife since I've lived here for 20 years, but something terrifying has been lurking around, and not even 2 hours ago, I had this problem. Police and animal control left about 30 minutes ago. They found scratches on my clay roofing shingles. I'm sleeping with everything absolutely barricaded with my guns tonight. It started a week ago with a mixture of human and animal gurgled screams coming from the mountains, faint and distant, but if you're quiet enough outside, you could hear it faintly. 2 days pass and it's closer, louder, more spine-chilling. Another 2 days pass, and my neighbor had said that his pet birds are acting extremely strange since the noises started. A day passes, and I gather more information. The noises start the moment the sun is gone, so like 5:40 or 6. A day passes, screams are clear, terrifying, not consistent though. Maybe a 5-second scream every 30 or 45 minutes. The thing moves at a second-story height, jumps from tree to tree, to house it seems. Tonight, I heard something thud on my roof, and then I heard the scream. It sounded like a human-animal hybrid that sounded like it was gurgling its own blood. I quietly moved to the other room in order to look out the window to see what this thing was. I saw what looked like a humanoid figure about 5 feet tall, and it was on all fours. Its body was very bony, and it seemed to have claws for hands. As soon as I saw the creature, I immediately let out a scream. And this alerted the creature, and it jumped off my roof off into the woods. If you guys have any idea of what this could possibly be, please let me know. When I was about in middle school, my mom and I were driving home. It was winter and a full moon because I remember the snow glowing under the moon. It was only about 6 p.m., but it was really dark. We are going about 55 miles per hour when this thing crosses and steps in front of us. The only way that I can describe it is if you combined a deer, a dog, and a human. It stood about as tall as our windshield. It had the legs of what I described as a deer. Its back was hunched over and it was walking on all fours. It had the head of a dog, minus the ears, but its eyes were white. It didn't have a tail. The freakish thing about this creature was its skin. It wasn't a canine with mange or anything. It had actual human skin all the way down to its legs, too long to be dog legs. It had the rotting meat odor, and some parts of the flesh were broken open. It was pale white, and you could see its veins. This thing was very fast. It stood there and just ran across the road in the blink of an eye. My mom had to pull over to calm down, but we both saw it. This encounter occurred when I was about 8 years old. At the time, my family was renting and renovating a house that had been built in the 1700s. Some of the original house remained on the exterior. Admittedly, an awesome place to live as a kid, if you're the adventurous type. The property sat on 80 acres that included a large forest and a small pond about a mile back behind the house. My dad and sister and I would often walk out to the pond, which entailed a 15-minute journey through the dense New England forest. We called the pond Beaver Pond, due to the many beavers that lived in the area. My sister is 2 years younger than I, so she was about 6 at the time. One day, the three of us made our walk out to the pond in the early evening. Soon after we arrived at the pond, for some reason I wanted to go back to the house. I don't believe it was anything unusual. Halfway along the path home, the forest had started to dim a bit, and I got uncomfortable, so I began to run. I'm not sure why I wasn't looking in front of me. I might have been glancing to the sides and back, as my paranoia mounted, and suddenly, bam, I ran right into it. Shocked, I took a step back, and this is what I remember seeing. It was at least 3 times my height, and it stood on 2 legs. It was completely covered in long, gray-brown, slightly matted hair. Not fur, but hair, similar to humans. I recall it looking like a sloth, especially the head, that was walking upright on hind legs, with very slow movements. Almost if it was moving in slow motion. I don't remember any facial features. Its arms were held up, kind of like a kangaroo's front legs. I didn't sense any malice or aggression coming from the creature. If anything, I got the feeling that it was surprised as I was. As soon as I got over my shock, I ran around it and continued running back to our house. I glanced back and saw it slowly turning its entire body around to look at me as I raced home. A couple of days ago, I asked my mom if she remembered me telling her about the incident, and she did, and added a couple of details. She said that I did describe a face and eyes watching me, and that at some point it hid behind a tree to watch me. I don't recall that part. Now, when I was 18, I was watching an episode of Unsolved Mysteries with my father late at night. A segment about a Sasquatch came up. After the segment, my dad told me that once, when we lived in New Hampshire, he took my sister in the family station wagon for a drive through the woods around the house. He said that at one point, both he and my sister saw something brown race across the road in front of them. At first, I thought it was a deer, he said, but I quickly realized that it had a humanoid shape and it stood up on 2 legs, taking giant strides. I recently asked my sister about this, and she remembers it well. So there you have it. I know all too well about the fallibility of memory, and I readily admit that there were a lot of inconsistencies, but I've documented exactly what I remember, no more or less. At the time of the encounter, I didn't really know anything about ghosts, monsters, or Bigfoot. I did, however, have an intense phobia of primate faces for the rest of my childhood, up until I hit adolescence. Some people have suggested that I undergo regression hypnosis, but to be honest, I'm a little too afraid to. I can't shake the sense that there was more to the encounter that I can't remember, or was somehow lost. There could be a perfectly normal explanation. In fact, this is likely. However, I haven't been able to come up with anything that makes sense, other than the whole thing being the overactive imagination of a child. This happened in the middle of the night at my mom's house some years ago. I was asleep on the floor in the living room. Next to the living room is a room that can be seen through 2 large French doors. We call it the middle room. Next to that was my mother and stepdad's bedroom. The light in the middle room was left on, partly dimmed at night. I awoke and I saw 3 short gray aliens walking around in the middle room. They were about 5 feet tall, had long skinny arms, and were wearing these dark colored jumpsuits. The arms stood out to me the most because of how thin they were with no muscle tone. The eyes looked solid black and they were larger than a human's, though not as large as shown in some depictions. I don't remember about the noses or mouth, other than that those features were small and not noticeable. I don't remember any details about hands. I was able to sit up partly as I was watching them, but I had no energy to do anything else. They didn't seem to notice that I was watching them. Within a couple of minutes, I fell back to sleep. I'm guessing that they transmit something to keep everyone passed out, but sometimes it doesn't always work 100%. Here's the kicker. In the morning, my mom walked in and she said that the aliens were there the night before. I then told her what I saw. I asked her how many there were and what they looked like. Her description matched what I had seen. She had some other alien encounters, but this was the only time that I was there as a witness. This encounter happened around 2 years ago while I was living with my parents in Texas. At the time, I was waking up from a short nap and I didn't see anything unusual. I just figured it was some partial dream or something. I was napping on my bed. At the time I had a futon, so I wasn't too far off the ground, in the middle of the day. I can't remember the exact timing of when this took place to save my life. As I opened my eyes, I saw for only a second the image of a white humanoid creature kneeling on its haunches, looking at me. It couldn't have been very tall since its eyes were only an inch above my bed. I could see the top of its knees, which were resting against its head. While I can't remember many details about its face, I knew somehow that it wasn't entirely right, for a lack of a better term. I can't remember if it even had hair on its head, or the color of its eyes, but I can remember that its skin was very pale, and looked as if it was just skin and bones. I don't know why the image of this creature was so vivid, even though I only saw it for a second, but even to this day, it stands out. The best thing that I can refer this thing to is a crawler. It was around 1 a.m. and I was gaming on my PC, since it was the weekend and I didn't have to worry about waking up for school. I stood up from my desk and made my way to the bathroom. I did my business as usual, but I noticed that the window was open. It was one of those windows that you have to slide open and close. Since I lived in Australia, it had a mosquito netting. Although it was pitch black outside, during the day it had rained on and off multiple times. The wind was picking up and I thought I'd have to go and close the window in case it rained again. The window was located directly above the bathtub, so in order to reach it, you'd have to put 1 foot inside. The window would always require a bit of effort to close, so as I started to close it, it made its usual sound as it dragged against the frame. Now before I get to the scary part, I have to explain the layout of my house. This was my old 2-story apartment complex, and outside and underneath the window is a little roof overhang which shields the back door. As soon as the window started to close, I heard 2 loud footsteps banging on the roof, and then for a half second, I saw the silhouette of a humanoid being go past the window, as if it just jumped. I heard no landing sound, but this was entirely possible since the fence to the left of the bathroom was about 2 meters away from tall grass on the other side. Now, I know that it was really dark, but I swear that this wasn't a bird or a bat with its outstretched wings. It was definitely a humanoid shape, and it was much too large to be a possum. I instinctively jerked back out of the bathtub, and I ran into my parents' room, screaming and waking them up. Now this is the part that makes me sick to my stomach. My parents' curtains were wide open, but this means that the creature would have been able to stare at my parents sleeping. I don't know how I managed to sleep that night. If this was truly an alien, then it was only 1 meter away from me through a wall and a window. This happened about 4 years ago, before people started getting internet access. We had never heard of shadow people or anything remotely similar, and if we wanted to learn about something, we went to the public library, and I took every opportunity to read about ghosts, vampires, and demons. I grew up in a very negative and a very angry home, so in retrospect, I can see how something like this came to be in my house. A friend and I were hanging out at my house, and we decided to leave. I was 2 years under the age of driving, but Tom had his license and his own car. We left the house through the kitchen door into the backyard, from which you make an immediate right turn, go through the gate, and you're standing on the driveway. Even though nobody else was home, we typically didn't bother locking the kitchen door, because it was a safe and quiet neighborhood and the door was behind a gate. We went to his car, but as I got in, he remembered that he had forgotten something inside. I waited in the car as he went back in through the gate and into the kitchen. The kitchen was what I referred to as a shotgun kitchen. When you went through that door, you could see the whole length of the kitchen and down the entire hallway that ended in a bathroom. Down that hall, the doorway to my bedroom was the first door on the left, and immediately across from it was the doorway to the den with the sofa and TV. Not more than 10 seconds after he went in, Tom came flying through that gate faster than I thought he could move. His skin had gone pale, and he was definitely horrified of something. He jumped in the car and turned it over and hauled it out of my driveway. He wouldn't answer my questions about what was going on until we were gone. He told me that he went into the kitchen. Movement down the hall caught his attention. He said that he saw someone come out of my room, cross the hall, and enter the den. He said it was shaped like a person and it reminded him of a ghost, except that instead of being white, it was black and it scared the crap out of him. I had known Tom for a couple of years up to this point, and him being a liar was not part of his personality. He just wasn't the type to make things up. I lived in that house for 4 more years and never saw anything like that. However, Tom never set foot in that house again. He moved a couple of years after this happened and we lost touch. But a year or 2 after he moved, he tracked me down and showed up one night while we were shooting some pool and drinking beers. I asked him about that one night, and he still stood by his original account. I still believe him. When I was about 12 years old, I was laying in my bed on Christmas Eve. My bed was exactly opposite my large bedroom window, which gave me a view of the top of our property fence and a very large tree just beyond it. It was one of those weird nights where it seemed to never truly get dark. The sky kept a red hue about it all night. I was past the age of major Christmas excitement, so I fell asleep pretty normally. I woke up suddenly and I was fully alert. I was laying on my back when I opened my eyes. They met another set of eyes. Outside, sitting in the tree beyond the fence, that's what I can only describe as a demon. It was fully fixed on me and not moving. The eyes reminded me of a cat. Huge with elongated pupil, yellow and very iridescent. The body was not large. It was pretty lean and dark scaly skin covered its body. It was sitting with its legs pulled over its chest, kinda crouched. This visual has stayed with me vividly for my entire life. Over 20 years have passed and I can still see it sitting across from me like it was just the other day. I felt scared and threatened inside for myself. We maintained eye contact for what felt like a very long time. I don't remember breaking eye contact, saying anything, or seeing it move. It seemed like I just fell back asleep at some point, but I kind of doubt that's actually how it happened. I wondered if I was hypnotized or something. I woke up the next day and I remembered it immediately. I just knew it wasn't a dream. It was far too real. I didn't say anything to my parents at this point, as it was now Christmas Day, but I was sullen and it affected me greatly. Fast forward to the next Christmas Eve, and every Christmas Eve that followed me up until the age of 18. I fainted every single Christmas Eve for at least 5 years. Fainting was not something I typically did. It was scary in itself, and it always had the same experience. I'd feel this aura begin to fill itself into my body. I would then hear this faint symphony music and experience this coma-like state where I could hear the people around me trying to help, but I couldn't react. Eventually, I couldn't keep this secret anymore. I was smart enough to make the connection that I saw this demon and had since fainted daily on the anniversary of it. I told my parents what I'd seen years ago, expecting them to say something silly or crazy, but instead, they met me with a stony face and I got to hear their stories. I won't tell you what they experienced, but it wasn't pleasant. Needless to say, this is a very serious thing that me and my family are going through.